Welcome to Historical Archive, or what the series is called, Maritime History. So, this is where we talk about ships, mainly ocean liners, but we will talk about cruises sometimes. So, today we're breaking down the RMS Titanic. Now, I do feel like you already know the story. Media, like books, movies, mainly the James Cameron one, for some reason toys, it's everywhere basically. You know the story, but this is where we're going to go even more detail on the story. So, when it was built, and when the wreck was found. So, without enough further ado, let's begin. Titanic was in the Olympic class of liners. Now, the Olympic class liners consisted of the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. All three ships were owned by the White Star Line and built by Harland and Wolff. These Harland and Wolff workers actually died when constructing the Titanic. And it is crazy that we haven't even got to the sinking and people are already dying. So this would be Titanic's route of voyage. So first, it would start at Belfast, then go to Southampton, then Cherbourg, then Queenstown, and finally go to New York. Now on April 2, it would depart Belfast, but before departing Belfast, it would have 6 hours of sea trials, and then it would depart. On April 3, it would arrive at Southampton, and this would mainly just for storing like coal, food, and drinks for the voyage. And it would do this about a week until April 10th, where it would depart Southampton. Now, on the same day, April 10th, when it was departing Southampton, the ship next to Titanic, the New York, its mooring lines actually broke from the suction of the engines of Titanic. Now, it was so strong that it broke these lines, and it actually was going toward Titanic due to the suction. And this almost caused a collision. But that did not happen, as the tugboats and the captain of Titanic, which was Edward Smith, with their help, that would not happen. And it would depart, only having a 30-minute delay. And just a side note, it probably actually would have been better if Titanic and New York collided, as this would actually delay the ship and it probably would have actually sunk. So, probably would have been for the best if it collided, but that's history. Okay, so on the same day, April 10th, it would arrive at Cherbourg. Now, because Titanic was too big to fit on the dock, they used two ships. These were the SS Nomadic and the SS Traffic. Now, these two ships would bring passengers to Titanic for the voyage. And this would be for 2 hours. And after those 2 hours, Titanic would leave and set off to Queenstown Island. So on April 11th, 1912, Titanic would arrive at Queenstown Island. Now, it would board passengers like usual, and at 1:30 p.m., it would leave Queenstown Island. So, after this, it would set off to its first sea day, complete sea day, and it would set off to New York. And Queenstown is where one of the final photos of Titanic was ever taken of. You can probably see it on screen right now. So on April 12th, it was the first sea day, but we are skipping that because nothing really important happened. It was just a normal average sea day. So we are skipping to April 13th. So on April 13th, 1912, there would actually be a coal fire. Now this coal fire started at Southampton, but was only put out on the 13th. They moved all the coal to the port side, and this would cause a 3rd degree less to port, though they would luckily put out this fire. On the same day, the Marconi machine broke. Now, the Marconi wireless machine could contact other ships that are nearby. And the two Marconi operators, which would be Harold Bride and Jack Phillips, would actually fix the machine. Now, in Chipolis, you are not allowed to actually fix the Marconi machine. They were supposed to wait until they get to New York, but they still fixed it anyway. Finally, we arrive at April 14th, 1912. Now, the day of April 14th was a normal day. It was a very average day for passengers, like any other day. Now, if you know the story of Titanic, you know that the night of April 14th would have been one of the most famous maritime disasters in history. So, let's go to Chapter 3, The Sinking. During that night, Jack Phillips was working in the Marconi room. His sound on the Marconi room was turned high up. When he was doing this, the SS Californian, the closest ship to Titanic at that time, sent an ice warning to the Marconi room. Now, immediately, he was blasted and he ripped off the headset. Up on the bridge, it was a cold night. The person who was put in charge was First Officer Murdoch. Now, the captain and Second Officer Lightoller went to sleep, and he was put in charge. And if anything happened, he was ordered to wake up the captain. It was 11:39 p.m. And just then, 3 dings could be heard from the crow's nest, and then a call from the bridge. Frederick Fleet would be on the other line, and he would say, "Iceberg, right ahead." And immediately they would turn hard to starboard, which is, in tiller commands, turn the ship to port. Officer Murdoch orders the engines to stop. And then, at 11:40 p.m., it hits. So what you see on your screen is the iceberg damage. And as you see, 6 compartments have been damaged. Now, Titanic has 16 of these watertight compartments. Titanic could only stay afloat with the first 4 compartments filled up. But as the iceberg hit 6 compartments, that means that Titanic is now in danger. It's 11:45 p.m. and the crew do not know the severity of the damage. But right now the captain and one of the designers of the ship who was on board, Thomas Andrews, are at the bridge. It's right now been 5 minutes since the iceberg impact. And 5 minutes later, at 11:50 p.m., the engines of the Titanic would be turned on again for the time being. At 11:56 p.m., the crew realized that the ship is sinking, and the engines were turned off for one final time. Also, something that happened at this time is the steam. Now, the funnels started to release steam at 11:56, and the steam was so loud that the crew could hardly hear each other. Another thing that would happen at this time would be that the passengers would be woken up by crew. It's April 15, 1912. Right now, in the Marconi room, Jack Phillips contacts a ship named the Carpathia. But when Carpathia hears that Titanic is sinking, Carpathia puts full steam ahead to Titanic's location. At 12:30 a.m., the passengers and crew would see a mysterious ship in the distance. Now, I will get to this mysterious ship in Chapter 4, The Aftermath. As Titanic's crew saw this mysterious ship in the distance, they decided to fire flares to get its attention, but the ship would not respond. At 12:40 a.m., the first lifeboat would be launched. Now, not that many people actually go on this lifeboat, as people still didn't actually know what was going on with Titanic. The officer that was launching the lifeboats on the starboard was Officer Murdoch, and the officer that was launching lifeboats on the port side was Officer Lightoller. Now, Officer Murdoch followed orders, which the orders were women and children first, and if there's room, men. Lightoller, on the other hand, took it as women and children only. It's 12:50 a.m. on board Titanic. The sinking starts to accelerate. Water from the Atlantic Ocean started to go into the plumbing of the doomed vessel. As you see right now, it's about 1:30 a.m. on the Titanic. Titanic has started to develop a port list. Around 1:35 a.m., the Titanic's bow is starting to go under. At 1:52 a.m., the final flare is launched from Titanic. It's 2:05 a.m. Right now, Titanic only has 15 minutes until it goes to the bottom of the Atlantic. At this time, the final lifeboat would be launched on board Titanic before it went under. 5 minutes later, somewhere at 2:10 a.m., the captain of the Titanic and Thomas Andrews, one of the designers of Titanic, are last seen at the bridge. Both of them died in this disaster. Another thing that happened at 2:10 a.m. was the band that started to play Near My God to Thee. Near My God to Thee is right now playing in the background, if you can hear it. This song was the last song that the band played before going under. When the water reached the funnel's cable started snapping, and immediately the funnel started to fall over. When the funnel fell over, it almost hit another boat. This boat was turned over and had some passengers on it. Luckily, it missed it from a few mere inches. At 2:15 a.m., the second funnel would fall. Now, when the second funnel fell, it was seen by survivors that fire and smoke came out of the funnel when it fell. Now, they still debated what this actually was. So, at 2:19 a.m., Titanic would break in two. Immediately, all lights would turn off. The only light that would stay on would be emergency lights. But that would only stay on for a little while, until they went off too. Titanic didn't completely break into parts, because Titanic still had a double bottom. Now this double bottom, when Titanic broke in two, the double bottom was still hanging on to the stern and the bow. So when the bow was being dragged down to the ocean floor, the stern, because it was still hanging on with the double bottom, stern was going vertical and being dragged down with the bow. Soon after, this double bottom would snap, but it was already too late and the stern was almost completely vertical. And finally, at 2:20 a.m., Titanic would go down into the freezing Atlantic, taking many people who are still clinging on to her to the ocean floor. From 3:30 a.m. to 4 a.m., one of the ships that Titanic called from the Marconi wireless room came to Titanic's aid. This was the RMS Carpathia. Now, Carpathia did not know that Titanic was already underwater and had long been underwater since 2:20 a.m. At 4:10 a.m., the first lifeboat would be brought on board the Carpathia's deck. More started to follow, and it was concluded that 705 people survived the sinking of the Titanic. And there were 1,500 deaths on board Titanic, estimated, as we don't know the exact number of deaths on board Titanic. We only know an estimate. Back on mainland, Titanic was a huge tragedy, and people wanted to know more about tragedy. And this is where the conflicting reports come from newspapers. Let me show you some. New York Times said, Titanic sinks in 4 hours after hitting iceberg, sank in 2 hours and 40 minutes, with 1,250 perished, and 866 rescued. Definitely not. Next one. The Boston Daily Globe says Titanic sinks, 1,500 die. That is estimated, so correct. So probably more information came up. And 675 is still wrong. Next. And finally, personally, my favorite newspaper, Titanic sinking. No lives lost. Do I really have to say anything more? Now, on April 18th, 1912, the Carpathia would arrive at New York City. An inquiry was held to investigate. Now, the conclusion for the sinking was that the Titanic sank intact. Now, this is completely, of course, not true. Even though the majority of passengers said that they saw Titanic split in two, this was their conclusion for 1912. And a passenger who I haven't talked about, Bruce Ismay, which was the president of the White Star Line, the company that owned Titanic, was cleared of all wrongdoings. But in the public, his reputation was tarnished from the sinking of Titanic, as he was one of the passengers who got on the lifeboat, and the public saw Ismay as a coward. Now, let's talk about the mysterious ship that Titanic saw that night. Now, it is debated what the ship was, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people, including me, think that this ship was the SS Californian. Now, the same SS Californian that Jack Phillips was talking to before the iceberg struck. Because the crew of the SS Californian, in the inquiry of the Titanic, would say that they saw a ship stop and would start sending flares, just like Titanic did. Now, the Californian's crew actually did not know what was actually happening. That's why they didn't help, because they were confused what was going on. They tried to contact it by using Morse lights, as the Marconi room operator on the SS Californian was now sleeping. but Titanic would not respond. The crew realized their mistake when the Marconi operator turned on the wireless machine and then started to hear the other ships talking about what happened to Titanic. The SS California did try to help with the search and asked Carpathia, but Carpathia declined and said that everything that could be done has been done. Another ship that tried to help with the Titanic situation was the sister ship, the Olympic. Now, the Olympic did ask to pick up some of the survivors. Bruce Ismay declined, saying that seeing the Olympic, the near identical sister of the Titanic, would freak some of the passengers out. Now we're going to talk about the wreck of the Titanic. So after the Titanic went down in 1912, no one actually knew about it ever since. Some people tried finding the wreck, but failed. This is until a man named Robert Ballard makes a deal with the U.S. military that if he finds 2 nuclear submarines and still has time left over, he could search for the Titanic. U.S. military agrees to this proposition, and Robert Ballard sets off to find these 2 submarines. Robert Ballard would find the 2 sunken submarines, and would still have 12 days to find the Titanic. And finally, since 1912, Titanic would be seen again. On September 1st, 1985, Robert Ballard would find the Titanic. The bow and the stern would be separate. This was mainly, of course, from the breakup. And while the Titanic's bow looked completely fine, the stern, let's just say the stern has seen better days. The wreck in 2023 is slowly deteriorating due to bacteria eating the metal. And that was the end of episode 1. Come back for episode 2, where we're gonna talk about a ship that was called the Empress. If you know what ship I'm talking about, please leave it down in the comments. And also, if I did get anything wrong, please let me know in the comments, because I will be checking comments. And I did purposely leave some details out for the video isn't that long. It's more of not important details like the lifeboat launchings, each lifeboat, because I know I'm going to talk about each lifeboat and when they launched at what time. One last thing, credits to Titanic Honor and Glory. That was for the photos of the sinking. You were seeing their 2023 animation that they made. I'll leave the animation in the description, so if you want to watch it, it's in the description. And I hope you have a happy new year. Goodbye.